open with a powerful emotional hook. What if the greatest tragedy is not death itself, but living as if we will never face it? We whisper about it in hospital corridors. We avoid the word at dinner tables. We scroll past it in headlines. But the truth is this: when we dare to look at mortality with courage, it changes how we live. Stay with me in this conversation, because by the end, you won't just understand the signs that life may be nearing its end. You will understand why that awareness might be the most powerful invitation to live fully, love bravely, and leave nothing unsaid. What if the greatest tragedy is not that we die, but that we refuse to talk about it while we are still fully alive? What if the silence around death is quietly stealing the depth from our relationships, our courage, and our capacity to love? We live in a culture that treats death like a contagious idea, something to be avoided, whispered about, or dressed up in euphemisms so we don't have to feel the weight of it. We say someone passed, we say they're no longer with us, we lower our voices, we change the subject, and in doing so, we miss something profoundly human. The truth is, awareness of death is not morbid, it is clarifying. When we allow ourselves to gently consider that life is finite, something shifts. The petty arguments lose their grip. The need to prove ourselves softens. The urgency to say, "I love you," grows louder. Mortality has a way of stripping away performance and leaving us with what is real. Many of us move through our days assuming there will be time to mend the relationship, time to chase the dream, time to become the person we keep postponing. But what if the illusion of endless tomorrows is the very thing keeping us from living bravely today? When we avoid the conversation about death, we also avoid the responsibility of living intentionally. Because once you admit that life ends, you can no longer afford to live on autopilot. There is a quiet courage in turning toward this topic instead of away from it. It takes vulnerability to say, "I am not in control of how long I'm here." It takes humility to admit that our bodies are not permanent structures, but fragile vessels carrying breath for a limited time. And yet, in that vulnerability, there is power. When we stop pretending we are invincible, we start becoming intentional. Talking about the signs that life may be nearing its end is not about predicting doom. It is about honoring the sacredness of the time we have. It is about noticing the subtle signals, physical, emotional, relational, that remind us life moves in seasons. We are born, we grow, we struggle, we love, we lose, and eventually we let go. This is not a failure of existence. It is the design of it. If we had the courage to normalize this conversation, imagine how differently we might show up for one another. Imagine sitting at the bedside of someone you love and not feeling paralyzed because you've never practiced talking about endings. Imagine being able to ask, "What do you need right now?" without fear of breaking something fragile. Imagine living your own life in such a way that if tomorrow were uncertain, today would feel honest. There is a profound invitation here. When we look directly at the reality that death is part of the human story, we are forced to confront the question, am I living in alignment with what matters most? Not what impresses, not what distracts, not what numbs, but what truly matters. The relationships we nurture, the kindness we extend, the forgiveness we offer, the risk we take in the name of authenticity. We avoid this topic because it scares us. But sometimes what scares us is also what wakes us up. Mortality is not just an ending, it is a mirror. It reflects back how we are living right now. And if we are brave enough to look, it will gently ask us to stop waiting, to stop withholding love, to stop shrinking, to stop assuming there is always more time. This conversation is not about fear. It is about freedom, the freedom that comes when we stop pretending life is endless and start treating it as the fragile, breathtaking gift that it is. There is something deeply human about the body knowing what the mind does not yet want to admit. Long before words are spoken, long before diagnoses are fully understood, the body begins to whisper. And sometimes, as life draws closer to its natural end, those whispers grow softer, slower, quieter. Not dramatic, not theatrical. Just a gradual turning inward. One of the signs that life may be nearing its end is profound physical withdrawal. A tiredness that sleep does not fix, a heaviness that feels different from ordinary fatigue. The body, in its wisdom, begins conserving energy. Muscles weaken. Movements become smaller. The desire to sit, to lie down, to simply rest becomes stronger than the desire to engage. This can be terrifying for loved ones to witness. We are wired to fix, to energize, to encourage. Get up. Eat something. You'll feel better. But what if this slowing down is not something to fight? What if it is not giving up but letting go? There is a difference. And understanding that difference requires us to sit with discomfort instead of trying to outrun it. As appetite decreases, it can feel alarming. Food has always been love in so many cultures. Feeding someone is caring for them. So when someone begins to eat less or not at all, it can feel like rejection or like a warning siren. But the body, again, may simply be doing what it is designed to do. Systems begin to slow. Digestion becomes less necessary. Energy is redirected. The need for nourishment changes. Sleep increases. Long stretches of quiet. More time with eyes closed than open. This is not laziness. It is not depression. It is not a lack of will. It is the body gently shifting gears. Think about how we begin life, sleeping off and slowly waking to the world. There is something almost poetic about how, at the end, we may return to that rhythm. More rest, less striving. What makes this sign so hard to accept is that we equate activity with aliveness. We measure vitality by productivity, by engagement, by motion. So when motion fades, we panic. But aliveness is not measured only in movement. Sometimes it is measured in presence, in a squeezed hand, in a soft breath, in a quiet moment where words are unnecessary. For the person experiencing the slowing, there may also be a subtle emotional shift. Less interest in the outside world. Few narrowing focus, not because love has disappeared, but because energy is precious. When energy becomes limited, it is spent differently, on silence, on memory, on what feels essential. The bravest thing we can do in these moments is resist the urge to force life to look the way it used to. Instead of demanding engagement, we can offer companionship. Instead of insisting on strength, we can honor vulnerability. Instead of interpreting withdrawal as abandonment, we can see it as transition. There is tenderness in this stage if we allow ourselves to see it. The body is not betraying us. It is communicating. It is saying, I am doing what I was created to do. And our role is not always to intervene, but sometimes to witness, to sit beside, to hold space without trying to control the outcome. This kind of physical withdrawal invites us into a deeper kind of love, the kind that is not based on performance or energy or conversation, but on presence. It challenges us to redefine strength. Strength, in these moments, may look like allowing rest, allowing quiet, allowing the body to lead. And perhaps the hardest truth is this: we cannot negotiate with biology forever. At some point, the body sets its own pace. When we learn to recognize this sign with compassion rather than panic, we create room for dignity. We create space for gentleness. We begin to understand that sometimes slowing down is not the enemy. Sometimes it is simply the final rhythm of a life that has been fully lived. There is a quiet shift that sometimes happens near the end of life, and it can be misunderstood if we are not paying attention with compassion. A person who once cared deeply about schedules, responsibilities, possessions, or even social rituals may begin to lose interest in them. The outside world grows softer, the urgency fades, what once felt pressing now feels distant. And to those watching, it can feel confusing, sometimes even hurtful. We live in a culture that measures engagement as proof of vitality. If someone stops asking about work, stops watching the news, stops worrying about finances, we assume something is wrong. We label it as depression, withdrawal, or apathy. But sometimes it is none of those. Sometimes it is a natural turning inward. As life nears its end, priorities often reorganize themselves without permission. The noise of the external world becomes less important than the inner landscape. Conversations that once revolved around plans and productivity begin to revolve around meaning and memory. The future loosens its grip, and the present moment becomes both smaller and deeper. For the person experiencing this, there may be a sense of simplification. The mind and heart begin to sift through what truly matters. Material concerns, who gets what needs fixing, what remains unfinished may briefly surface, but then even those can fade. What remains is often relational and spiritual. Who do I love? Who loves me? Did my life mean something? These questions grow louder than any headline or deadline. To witness this shift requires emotional maturity. It asks us not to take it personally when someone we love no longer wants to engage the way they used to. Their decreased interest in conversation or activity is not necessarily rejection. It may be conservation. Energy becomes sacred. Attention becomes selective. The circle narrows not out of coldness, but out of focus. There can also be a profound sense of detachment from identity roles. The career-driven father may stop talking about achievements. The devoted mother may stop worrying about managing everyone's needs. The friend who always entertained may prefer silence. It is as if the titles and performances slowly fall away, leaving only the core human being underneath. And if we are honest, this can make us uncomfortable, because we cling to roles. We define ourselves by what we do and how we show up in the world. When someone begins to release those identities, it mirrors a truth we rarely face. None of those roles are permanent. Underneath them, we are simply human. This turning inward is not necessarily loneliness. In fact, it can be deeply reflective. Many people begin revisiting memories quietly. They may seem distant, but internally they are traveling through decades, replaying childhood moments, reliving love stories, reconsidering regrets. It is an inner journey that does not always need an audience. Our instinct might be to pull them back outward, to insist on normalcy, to reintroduce distractions. But sometimes the most loving thing we can do is honor the inward gaze, to sit beside someone in silence without demanding engagement, to understand that their energy is being directed somewhere we cannot fully see. This sign teaches us something powerful about living too. If the external world eventually loses its importance, maybe we should examine what we are investing in now. Are we building a life rooted only in productivity and possessions? Or are we nurturing depth, connection, and meaning that will matter even when everything else fades? When someone begins to detach from the external world near the end, it is not always despair. Sometimes it is clarity, a quiet recognition that what once seemed urgent was never ultimate. And if we are brave enough to witness that shift without fear, it can gently remind us to start turning inward now while we still have the strength to live what truly matters. There is something profoundly moving that often happens when a person senses that their time may be limited. Words that were once postponed begin to rise to the surface. Conversations that were avoided suddenly feel urgent. Apologies are offered. Gratitude is spoken. Love is expressed with a clarity that leaves no room for misunderstanding. It is as if the soul recognizes what the calendar cannot promise, that there may not be another chance to say what truly matters. This is not dramatic. It is not always announced. Sometimes it is subtle. A quiet request to speak to someone alone. A hand held a little longer than usual. A sentence that begins with, "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." In these moments, we are witnessing the human need for emotional completion. We carry unfinished stories inside us, words we swallowed to keep the peace, forgiveness we withheld because pride felt safer, appreciation we assumed the other person already knew. But when mortality becomes real, pride loses its power, ego softens. What remains is the deep desire to leave this world without emotional debris. For some, this looks like reconciliation, a call to a sibling after years of distance. A quiet, "I'm sorry" for a mistake made long ago. For others, it looks like blessing, telling their children how proud they are, telling a partner how deeply they were loved. It is a closing of loops, a tying of loose ends. And here is what makes this so tender: it requires vulnerability. To apologize is to admit imperfection. To say, "I love you" with finality is to risk the achy of goodbye. To forgive is to release a story we may have carried for decades. These are not small acts, they are acts of courage. Sometimes loved ones misunderstand this urgency. They may think, "Why bring this up now?" But this is precisely when it matters most. When time feels finite, clarity sharpens. The heart becomes honest. There is less energy for pretending, less tolerance for emotional clutter. It can also feel overwhelming for those receiving these words. There may be tears, guilt, gratitude, even confusion. But underneath it all is something sacred, the opportunity to witness someone choosing truth over silence. And that is a gift. Not everyone gets this chance. Not every goodbye is prepared. That is why this sign carries such weight. It reminds us that we should not wait for a hospital room or a final diagnosis to say what needs to be said. If we know we love someone, say it. If we owe someone an apology, offer it. If we need to forgive, begin the work now. Because what we see in these final conversations is not just about dying. It is about integrity. It is about wanting to leave this world with relationships tended, not tangled, with words spoken, not buried. There is something deeply human about wanting to be known fully before we go, to make sure the people we love understand our hearts, to ensure that misunderstandings do not outlive us. In these moments, people often become their most authentic selves. No performance, no armor, just truth. And maybe that is the quiet lesson hidden inside this sign. We do not have to wait until the end to live this way. We can practice emotional courage now. We can clean up our side of the street. We can speak love more freely and apologize more humbly. When someone begins saying unfinished things, it is not only a sign of transition. It is a powerful reflection of what matters most when everything else falls away. And if we are paying attention, it invites us to start living and loving with that same urgency today. There is a sacred tenderness that often emerges when someone begins to look back over their life with unusual intensity. Stories that have been told before are told again, but differently. Memories surface that haven't been mentioned in decades. Childhood moments. First loves, old mistakes, quiet victories. It can feel as if the person is flipping through the pages of their own history, carefully, deliberately, trying to make sense of the whole story. This is not random nostalgia. It is meaning-making. As life nears its end, many people begin reflecting more deeply. They revisit defining chapters, times of courage, times of regret, moments that shaped who they became. It's as though the mind is gathering threads, weaving them into something coherent. The question underneath the storytelling is often unspoken but powerful: did my life matter? We all want our lives to feel significant. We want to believe that the love we gave counted, that the sacrifices were worth it, that the mistakes did not cancel out the goodness. And when time feels finite, that desire for coherence grows stronger. People begin searching their memories not just for events, but for meaning. You may notice someone repeating certain stories again and again, a tale from their youth, a proud achievement, a moment of heartbreak. To the listener, it might sound repetitive, but to the storyteller, it is integration. They are revisiting emotional landmarks, placing them carefully in the narrative of who they are. There can also be a shift in tone. Stories that were once told with humor may now carry deeper reflection. Regrets may be acknowledged with surprising honesty. Gratitude may appear in places it never did before. It is as if the protective layers have thinned, allowing vulnerability to come forward. Sometimes this reflection includes wrestling with unresolved pain. Old wounds may resurface. Questions like, "What if I had chosen differently?" or "Did I do enough?" may linger in the air. These are not signs of failure. They are signs of humanity. To look back is to confront both beauty and imperfection. For loved ones, this stage offers a powerful opportunity, not to correct the story, not to argue the details, but to witness, to listen without interruption, to affirm the value of the life being remembered, to say, "Yes, that mattered. You mattered." There is profound dignity in being heard at the end of life, in having someone sit with your memories as if they are sacred texts. Because in many ways, they are the record of love given, risks taken, lessons learned. Reflection can also bring peace. When someone begins to see their life as a whole, flawed, complicated, beautiful, they may find a quiet acceptance. Not every decision was wise, but the story, taken together, was theirs. And there can be comfort in that ownership. What is striking about this sign is how it mirrors what we all long for, regardless of age. We want to live lives that we can look back on without shame consuming us. We want to create stories that feel meaningful. Watching someone reflect at the end reminds us that we are writing our own narrative every day. If the final season of life often involves reflection and storytelling, perhaps we should start asking ourselves now, what story am I creating? Am I living in a way that I will one day recount with honesty and pride? Am I choosing connection over resentment, courage over comfort, love over fear? Because eventually, whether decades from now or sooner than we expect, we too will look back. And in that moment, what will matter most will not be how busy we were, but how deeply we lived.